Most people make the same mistake when they try to stand up to a narcissist. Without realizing it, they enter a battle that was carefully designed for them to lose. Size. The moment you recognize that you're being treated unfairly, your first instinct is usually to speak honestly. You approach the situation with real emotions, a desire for fairness, and the hope that the problem can be resolved through a calm conversation. You explain how deeply you've been hurt, believing that if they truly understand your pain, they'll want to fix the damage. Sarcastic. But that's not what is happening. You aren't stepping into a healthy discussion. You're walking into a psychological trap. A narcissist doesn't see relationships through the same lens you do. Their reality is built around a distorted version of themselves, where they are always the misunderstood hero or innocent victim, while everyone else exists to support that story. Facts don't matter. Logic doesn't matter. Even your heartbreak doesn't matter. Every emotional reaction you show, whether it's tears, anger, frustration, or desperation, is simply turned into evidence that you're the unstable one. In their mind, your emotional response proves they were right all along, allowing them to feel powerful and justified. The moment you fight with emotion, you're playing by rules they created. They control the game, they change the rules whenever they want, and they always position themselves as the winner. That's why these arguments usually leave you exhausted, confused, and questioning yourself. Everything changes when you stop reacting and begin responding. Those two actions may seem similar, but they are completely different. Reacting is automatic. It's the defensive explanation, the raised voice, the emotional outburst, or the desperate attempt to be understood. In those moments, you're allowing the narcissist to control your emotional state and dictate the direction of the conversation. Responding is something entirely different. It's intentional, it's calm, it's grounded in self-control. Instead of allowing your emotions to drive your words, you make a conscious decision to stay rooted in reality. You refuse to participate in the manipulation. You stop trying to convince someone who has already decided to ignore the truth. When you respond instead of react, your words become something much stronger than emotional weapons. They become solid boundaries. They establish a clear picture of reality that gaslighting cannot easily erase. Instead of defending yourself endlessly, you create a firm line that says, "This is what is true, and I will not argue about it." To truly remove a narcissist's power over you, you have to understand what actually drives their behavior. Many people assume narcissists are simply confident, arrogant people who enjoy conflict. Because of that belief, they either fight back with anger or waste endless energy trying to make the narcissist understand their point of view. Neither approach works. Your anger gives them emotional fuel. Your logical explanations rarely interest them because their goal isn't understanding, it's maintaining control. What they fear most isn't your insults or your temper. They fear being seen clearly. The personality they present to the world is often built to protect a much deeper wound. Beneath the confidence, superiority, and constant need for control often lies profound insecurity and buried shame. Imagine a massive fortress covered in polished armor and mirrors. It appears intimidating and impossible to penetrate, but its real purpose isn't to attack others. It's to hide what exists behind the walls, a fragile part of themselves they desperately don't want anyone to discover. The image they project is carefully maintained because facing that hidden reality feels unbearable to them. Their greatest fear is that someone will recognize the cracks beneath the performance and realize that the confident mask is covering deep emotional emptiness. That's why calm truth is so powerful. When you speak with confidence without anger or emotional chaos, you're not trying to tear down their defenses. You're simply refusing to participate in the illusion. It's like holding up a perfectly clear mirror. For a brief moment, they are forced to confront the gap between the image they desperately protect and the reality they spend so much energy hiding. They don't fear being yelled at. They don't fear personal attacks. What truly unsettles them is someone who sees through the performance and refuses to be manipulated by it. That kind of clarity threatens the fragile identity they've built to avoid facing their own unresolved pain. This is why setting boundaries isn't an act of hostility. It isn't about punishment or revenge. It's an act of self-respect. Every calm boundary reminds you that your reality matters. Your peace deserves protection, and you no longer have to participate in someone else's distorted version of the truth. Understanding the difference between aggression and healthy boundaries is one of the most important lessons in recovering from narcissistic abuse. A narcissist will almost always try to convince you that your boundaries are cruel, selfish, or an attack on them. That confusion is intentional because if they can make you feel guilty for protecting yourself, they can continue controlling you. Aggression is about overpowering another person. It tries to force, intimidate, or manipulate someone into doing what you want. A boundary is the complete opposite. A boundary is a calm declaration of what you will and will not accept. It isn't about changing another person's behavior. It's about deciding how you will respond when your limits are ignored. Picture it this way. Aggression is walking onto someone else's property looking for a fight. A boundary is standing firmly on your own ground and saying, "This line belongs to me and you don't get to cross it." You're not trying to control them. You're protecting your own peace. The words you use matter, but your tone matters even more. A boundary spoken through yelling, arguing, or emotional chaos usually becomes another battle the narcissist is eager to fight. The moment you lose control emotionally, they know they've pulled you back into the game they understand best. But when you speak with quiet certainty, everything changes. Think about saying that 2 plus 2 equals 4. You don't raise your voice, argue, or beg someone to agree. You simply state it because it's true. Boundaries work the same way. When your voice is calm, steady, and confident, your certainty exposes the emotional chaos the narcissist is trying to create. Suddenly, the power dynamic shifts. You're no longer reacting to their manipulation. You're standing firmly in your own reality, refusing to let anyone redefine it. One of the most painful beliefs many survivors carry is the idea that they were targeted because they were weak or easily manipulated. That simply isn't true. Narcissists are often drawn to people who possess qualities they admire but cannot genuinely develop within themselves. They notice authenticity, confidence, compassion, and emotional strength. Those qualities become incredibly attractive because they represent something the narcissist desperately wants to possess or control. Think of a skilled predator observing a herd. It doesn't always chase the weakest animal. It often watches for the healthiest, strongest, and most valuable target because that offers the greatest reward. In much the same way, narcissists frequently seek out people whose emotional strength and character can provide them with validation, attention, and stability. 3 qualities commonly attract them. The first is empathy. Your ability to understand others, forgive mistakes, and search for the good in people is a beautiful strength. Unfortunately, a narcissist often interprets that kindness as permission to push your limits. They count on your compassion to excuse behavior that should never be tolerated. The second is competence. Whether it's your intelligence, career success, discipline, creativity, or ability to solve problems, these strengths become resources they want to benefit from. They may seek credit for your accomplishments or rely on your abilities to support the image they want others to believe. The third is integrity. Honest people naturally expect honesty from others. Because you value truth and fairness, it can be difficult to imagine someone intentionally manipulating, lying, or exploiting others without remorse. That assumption gives the narcissist valuable opportunities to hide their true intentions while you continue believing they're acting in good faith. Their goal isn't simply to enjoy your positive qualities. They want to absorb your energy, your confidence, and your sense of self. And if they realize they cannot completely control those qualities, their focus often changes. Instead of trying to possess your light, they begin trying to dim it because your confidence reminds them of everything they struggle to find within themselves. Rarely does a narcissist reveal this from the beginning. If they ignored every boundary on the first day, most people would walk away immediately. Instead, they start with tiny tests that seem harmless on the surface. Maybe it's a subtle insult disguised as humor. Maybe they conveniently forget an important promise. Maybe they make a disrespectful comment and immediately tell you that you're too sensitive. These moments aren't random. They're quiet tests designed to answer one question: will this be accepted? If you ignore the behavior just to avoid conflict, the narcissist learns something valuable. They begin mapping your limits. Once they discover what you'll excuse, they slowly push a little further. Small disappointments become broken commitments. Private jokes become public humiliation. Minor disrespect gradually grows into ongoing emotional abuse. This is how toxic patterns develop. Every time a small violation goes unchallenged simply to keep the peace, that behavior quietly becomes the new standard for how you're treated. Over time, your boundaries shrink while their sense of entitlement grows. That's why protecting your limits from the very beginning isn't selfish or unkind. It's an act of self-respect. Every healthy boundary reminds both you and the other person that respect is not something you negotiate away to keep a relationship alive. Every time you overlook disrespect, you unknowingly teach the narcissist exactly how far they can push you. Once they discover what you'll tolerate, they don't stop there. Each new violation becomes slightly more serious than the last, slowly conditioning you to accept behavior you once would have rejected without hesitation. The mind is remarkably adaptable. That's one of its greatest strengths, but it can also become a weakness in unhealthy relationships. Living in a constant state of tension eventually starts to feel normal. Walking on eggshells becomes part of your daily routine, and before long, you barely remember what it feels like to be treated with genuine respect, kindness, and emotional safety. Compassionate people often struggle to recognize this process because they naturally assume others think and feel the way they do. When a narcissist behaves cruelly, an empathetic person searches for reasonable explanations. Maybe they're stressed. Maybe work has been overwhelming. Maybe they're dealing with something painful. Instead of seeing a pattern, you see isolated incidents that deserve understanding. Over time, those excuses begin to erode your confidence. You stop trusting your own instincts and start questioning everything you feel. You ask yourself, am I overreacting? Am I being too sensitive? Did I misunderstand what happened? This is one of the most effective forms of manipulation. The narcissist shifts your attention away from their behavior and onto your reaction. Instead of examining their actions, you're constantly analyzing yourself. Eventually, you become uncertain of your own judgment, trapped in a reality where nothing feels clear anymore. But no one can live under that pressure forever. Eventually, there comes a moment when the illusion breaks. The narcissist crosses a line so completely that the manipulation can no longer hide the truth. In that instant, everything becomes clear. You realize the relationship isn't going to improve on its own. You stop waiting for an apology that never comes or hoping they'll suddenly become someone different. You understand that the only person capable of changing your life is you. That realization marks the beginning of your freedom. The next 7 statements are not designed to insult, provoke, or punish a narcissist. Their purpose is much simpler. They help you remain grounded in reality, protect your peace, and refuse manipulation without becoming part of the conflict. The first statement is, I see what you're doing. Manipulation survives through confusion. Narcissists often hide behind subtle criticism, passive-aggressive comments, mixed messages, or innocent-sounding questions. They depend on you doubting yourself, making excuses for them, or spending hours trying to decode what they really meant. When you calmly say, I see what you're doing, you interrupt that entire process. The important part is what comes next. You don't explain yourself. You don't argue. You don't list examples. The moment you begin defending your observation, you've given them something to debate. They'll deny it, twist your words, and try to convince you that you're imagining things. The strength of this statement comes from its simplicity. It lets them know that their behavior has been recognized without giving them an opportunity to redirect the conversation. They are left wondering exactly how much you understand, and that uncertainty removes much of the control they rely on. The second statement is, that is not my responsibility. Narcissists frequently try to place the consequences of their own choices onto someone else. If something goes wrong, someone else must be blamed. Their frustration becomes your problem. Their failures become your fault. Their emotional chaos becomes your burden to carry. Responding with, that is not my responsibility, calmly returns that burden to the person who owns it. For caring people, this can feel uncomfortable because helping others comes naturally. You want to solve problems and ease suffering, but there's a critical difference between supporting someone and accepting responsibility for choices that aren't yours. Refusing to carry someone else's emotional baggage isn't selfish, it's healthy. It prevents you from becoming the place where they unload every consequence they refuse to face themselves. The third statement is, I will not be spoken to that way. This isn't a request for better treatment. It's a boundary. You're not asking them to respect you. You're informing them that disrespect is unacceptable and that you won't participate in conversations where it continues. The way you say it matters just as much as the words themselves. Deliver it calmly, with confidence and finality, not anger. Think of it as stating a fact rather than starting an argument. If you respond with shouting or emotional intensity, the narcissist often sees an opportunity to pull you into another exhausting conflict. But when your voice remains steady and composed, you communicate something far more powerful. You show that your self-respect no longer depends on their approval, and that is a position they find much harder to manipulate. Showing anger tells a narcissist that they've succeeded in pulling you into the emotional battle they wanted. It reassures them that they still have influence over your emotions. But when you speak calmly, steadily, and without emotional urgency, the dynamic changes completely. A quiet boundary doesn't invite debate, it simply exists. You don't need to defend why their behavior was disrespectful or convince them that your feelings are valid. You calmly make it clear that respect is a basic requirement for having access to your life. If they refuse to offer it, they also lose the privilege of your time and attention. The fourth statement is, your feelings about this are not my responsibility. Narcissists often use their emotions as tools for control. Whether it's explosive anger, dramatic sadness, or convincing displays of victimhood, these emotional reactions are frequently meant to shift your focus away from yourself and onto them. They create emotional chaos, hoping you'll rush to calm them down while ignoring your own needs. When you calmly say, your feelings about this are not my responsibility, you break that unhealthy pattern. You're acknowledging that every adult is responsible for managing their own emotions. You're no longer accepting the role of emotional caretaker or allowing someone else's moods to dictate your behavior. Instead, you separate your emotional well-being from theirs and refuse to carry burdens that don't belong to you. The fifth statement is, I don't need to justify myself to you. Manipulative people often turn ordinary conversations into interrogations. Suddenly, you're expected to defend your choices, explain your motives, or prove that your memories and feelings are legitimate. The more you explain, the more opportunities they have to twist your words, change the subject, or use your explanations against you later. This statement ends that cycle by saying, I don't need to justify myself to you. You're refusing to participate in a conversation where you're constantly expected to defend your right to make your own decisions. You recognize that your choices don't require someone else's approval in order to be valid. Your life is not a courtroom, and you are no longer interested in standing trial simply because someone demands it. The sixth statement is, this conversation is over. One of the most frustrating experiences with a narcissist is becoming trapped in endless circular arguments. The discussion moves from one topic to another, old issues suddenly reappear, facts become distorted, and hours pass without any real resolution. The purpose isn't understanding, it's exhaustion. You are never required to stay in a conversation that has become manipulative or abusive. When you calmly say, this conversation is over, and then follow those words by leaving the room, ending the phone call, or stepping away, you transform your boundary into action. You're demonstrating that your peace is more valuable than winning an argument. Instead of continuing to invest your energy in a conversation that serves no healthy purpose, you choose yourself. The seventh statement is, I'm not interested in your opinion of me. This may be the most powerful statement of all because it removes the foundation on which narcissistic control often depends. Manipulation only works when you continue seeking the manipulator's approval. As long as they believe their praise or criticism determines your self-worth, they maintain influence over you. When you calmly say, I'm not interested in your opinion of me, you're communicating something much deeper than disagreement. You're showing that your identity no longer depends on their approval, their criticism, or their judgment. Your understanding of your own value comes from within, not from someone who repeatedly tries to distort it. Their words lose their power because you've stopped treating them as the authority on who you are. These 7 statements are powerful because they do something that many people don't realize. They shift the focus away from changing the narcissist and back onto protecting yourself. Most people enter arguments hoping the narcissist will finally understand, apologize, or admit they were wrong. Unfortunately, that rarely happens. Narcissistic manipulation isn't based on finding the truth. It's based on maintaining control. The moment you stop trying to convince them and instead reinforce your own boundaries, you remove the very conditions that allow the manipulation to continue. At the heart of narcissistic behavior is a carefully constructed image. On the surface, they may appear confident, successful, charming, or emotionally untouchable. However, this image often requires constant validation from other people to stay intact. Praise, attention, admiration, and the ability to influence others become emotional fuel. Every compliment, emotional reaction, or attempt to gain their approval strengthens the false image they work so hard to protect. This is why calm boundaries are often far more effective than emotional confrontations. When you refuse to argue, stop defending yourself, or decline to participate in endless emotional battles, you interrupt the unhealthy pattern that has benefited them for so long. They expect emotional reactions because those reactions reassure them that they still have influence over your thoughts and emotions. Your silence, your composure, and your firm boundaries send a very different message. You are no longer available for manipulation. A person with genuine self-confidence doesn't need constant reassurance from others to know their worth. Their confidence comes from their values, character, and personal integrity. They can accept disagreement without feeling personally threatened because their identity isn't dependent on controlling the opinions of those around them. For someone who relies heavily on external validation, however, boundaries can feel deeply uncomfortable. When you calmly refuse to explain yourself over and over, stop seeking their approval, or walk away from manipulative conversations, you remove the attention and emotional energy that once supported their behavior. It's not that your words are magically powerful. It's that your actions demonstrate something they cannot easily influence anymore: your independence. This is why emotional detachment often has a greater impact than anger. Anger still keeps you emotionally connected to the conflict. Calmness communicates that you no longer need their agreement, permission, or validation to feel secure in yourself. That quiet confidence often disrupts the unhealthy dynamic more effectively than any argument ever could. Ultimately, the greatest victory isn't changing the narcissist or proving that they were wrong. It's reclaiming ownership of your own life. Healing begins when their opinions no longer define your self-worth. Their criticism no longer controls your emotions, and their manipulation no longer influences your decisions. As you continue setting healthy boundaries, something remarkable happens. You stop living in reaction to someone else's behavior and begin living according to your own values. Your confidence grows because it is built on self-respect instead of external approval. Your peace no longer depends on whether someone understands you or agrees with you. It comes from knowing that you have the right to protect your emotional well-being. That is true freedom. It isn't about defeating a narcissist. It is about refusing to surrender your identity, your peace, and your future to someone else's need for control. Once you reach that place, manipulation loses its power because it no longer has access to the person you have become.